shot me on the side of the street. I won't say anything. I won't say anything.
No.
Spændingsserien Culprits er netop udkommet på Disney+, og den er simpelthen en af de mest spændende thrillers, vi har set i årevis. Culprits er spækket med stærkt skuespil, fed action og, ikke mindst, sindsoprivende twists, så vi holder med vilje mængden af klip på et minimum.
This is going to be fun.
Men kort fortalt handler serien om familiefaren Joe, som bærer rundt på en vild hemmelighed.
What are you not telling me? Long before we met, I did bad things.
Han var engang med til at begå et af historiens vildeste kup, og nu, 3 år senere, bliver Joe og de andre 20 pludselig jaget af en gådefuld og maskeret morder.
Who's this?
It's me. Somebody's killing us. Someone's coming.
I kan blive klogere på serien i vores komplette anmeldelse inde på Moovy.dk, og desuden har vi lavet et langt og dybdeborende interview med seriens skaber, J Blakeson.
You might have a stressful day and then you get more stress watching a thriller, but then it goes because you can work through it. It's like therapy or something.
Og måske lyder det her en smule blasfemisk og skørt, men Blakeson har efterhånden bevist, at han potentielt kan blive vor tids Alfred Hitchcock. For med sin prisbelønnede debutfilm The Disappearance of Alice Creed fra 2009, klemte Blakeson 1,5 times nerveflinsende spænding ud af et scenarie med blot 3 personer på ét sted.
I don't know where I am. No, I've been locked in. I can't get out. Can't you trace the call? You have to come now. Right now. He's gonna come back.
She forces them into the home, auctions off their house, and uses the proceeds to pay herself.
Because caring is my job. I will grab your dick and balls, and I will rip them clean off.
Og for få år siden fyldte filmmageren igen vores år med adrenalin med thrilleren I Care A Lot, hvor Rosamund Pike og Peter Dinklage slog gnister.
Hello, Martha Grayson. I don't like you.
You only just met me.
Blakeson har altså tydeligvis et usædvanligt stærkt greb om thrillergenrens arketyper og virkemidler, og efter at have set alle 8 blændende afsnit af Culprits, glædede vi os selvfølgelig enormt til at tale med manden over Zoom.
First of all, I just want to say that I really, truly love this show. I know a lot of journalists often just say that sort of stuff to break the ice, but this was so incredibly gripping. This was so intense. I was so glued to my the edge of my seat for all 8 episodes, and which actually reminds me of a great quote from your fellow producer Stephen Garrett, who says that in terms of this sort of genre, this sort of story, there's almost like a masochistic pleasure that you derive from it. Of course, this constant feeling of dread, of your nerves being shattered, of that something bad is waiting just around that corner. I guess it's the same reason why also I spend way too much money on way too strong hot sauces. I mean, it hurts, but I love the taste. And similarly,
I think that's true. I think, shows like this and movies where you're sort of taken on not quite a roller coaster ride, but it's like this intense ride that, you can't not look away. You can't. It's an experience that I really love as a viewer and love doing as a creator as well.
Yeah, but that's what I wanted to ask you. What is it that sort of attracts you to wanting to give our nerves a giant workout?
I don't know. I think it's just one of those things that it's really fun to put together. It's really fun to write, and then really fun to make work. Because like in the middle bit of it, when you're filming it, it's not that tense. There's some moments that are, but it's like you're getting little bits, and then when you put them all together, they work so well. But I like all genres of cinema, but I think the one, there's like a perfect comedy and a perfect thriller, just almost like the ideal movie for me. That if you can get either one of those and they really, really work, they change something in you physically. As you say, that it has this power over you, and it's not, if you can do that and you can have some other stuff at the same time, for me, it provides this great sort of engine to a story that you can give people all of those thrills and spills using genre, but then you don't have to be generic. You can then build a story on top of that and use the genre as, like, as I say, this engine for the vehicle of your show or your movie. And it allows you to do interesting things, I think.
Mm. And like you say, it's probably not as intense in that moment while you're making it that like it is for us viewers as we're watching it. But sometimes do you have that fear as a filmmaker? Like I mean, this show had a couple of the most intense scenes I've seen in ages, like with the hitman in the house and also the whole garbage truck sequence. But do you sometimes worry, is this as intense as I hope it will be until you're in that meeting with the audience and hearing an audience gasp and then realizing that, oh my, it is as effective as I hoped?
Yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, I see it in my head, and in my head it's tense, and then you write it down, and the way that I write, I try and make the experience of reading it tense. So the way that I use like the spaces between the lines and how many words are on a line, like you're trying to find out what happens next, and it's sort of very visually done on the page. But then the problem normally is that have you got enough time? Have you got enough time to get all the pieces you need? Because you need the ingredients. It's like it's all good like trying to make hot sauce, but if you haven't got chilies, then you can't make hot sauce, right? So the thing that is actually quite tense when you're shooting is like, are we going to get it before the time runs out? So you talked about the garbage truck sequence. That one was shot across multiple countries. Like we shot it, some of it in the studio, we shot some of it as a stunt unit, we shot some of it in a real, on a real truck, we shot some of it in a set of a truck, some of it was in, we'd be shooting stuff 6 months later. So like Nathan was wearing those clothes like on and off for like 8 months. And so you're just constantly trying to figure it out. And at the same time, an editor is constantly putting the ingredients in and putting it together. Like, oh, what do we need? Oh, we need a shot of a hand. So you go back and you try and get one of those, and it's, when you first put it together and what ends up as a 5-minute sequence starts off as a 20-minute sequence because you're using all of the shots. And then you're like, well, this is all, we really like this bit, but this bit, get rid of that bit. And then you squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. And then you find all the moments, it's like music. You need to like the dynamics and the accents. And sometimes he needs to go up and he's come, I think he's good. And you find that in the edit. And then you get the composer in and the composer writes some music that helps with all that. And then you get the sound guys in and the sound guys put all the sounds in. And then when you see it in the final analysis, even though it was quite tense in the edit suite, when you get it into the final, the final sound mix, and you can hear all the crunches and the squeaks and the wheels and his breathing and, and the music is rising, that, you get the goose, as soon as you like start to get the goose pimples and you get the hairs on the back of your neck start coming up, I've got it. But that's when it's working, when it's exciting me and I know exactly what's going to happen when you're tense, because if you can make yourself tense, then, the audience will be tense.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of your previous films. I've just ordered Alice Creed for my collection as well from Amazon UK. And I discovered apparently that I Care a Lot is officially released on Blu-ray in Spain. I think it's the only country in the world. So I actually ordered from the Spanish Amazon. I
think it's also in South Korea, I think. Or maybe.
Yeah, okay. But what I wanted to say is that, of course, both of those movies also very much deal with the notion of crime. And I read a previous interview with you said, well, you've always been drawn to that. Of course, not in your real life, but as a storyteller. And Stephen Garrett, again, he also I read an interview with I think it was with Deadline he did a few days ago, where he also said that you've pretty much watched all there is in terms of the crime thriller movie genre. So also just in terms of you as a fan of that genre, I mean, what is it particular about this that has always drawn you? And I would also love to hear, are there particular movies within the genre that's had a huge impact on you, both as just as a moviegoer yourself and also as a storyteller?
I mean, I think I've seen a lot in the crime genre, but I've just seen a lot of movies. So it's not just the crime shows. That just happens to be a smaller bracket within this bigger bracket of having seen loads of movies. I'm one of those people, seemingly like yourself, who just constantly watches movies, watches old movies, watches new movies, watches foreign movies. I just love, I love movies. So I've grown up watching as much as I can. And that's why I wanted to make films, because I just fell in love with them. I just fell in love with the whole world of like losing yourself into the screen. And, I love all different genres, but the genre I think that I chose to sort of work in, I choose it because I think I'm interested in the things that sort of scare me. I'm not interested in, I hate guns, but because they terrify me. But there's something about kind of dealing with things that terrify you, especially as a writer. That's a really interesting way to sort of mine weird feelings about stuff. You know what I mean? That you can get that on the screen in a way that means you're not just sort of saying, oh, I want to make a film like, I don't know, Thief by Michael Mann. So let's you know, let's just do Thief, but like slightly different, you know.
What's wrong with you?
James Caan, Thief.
Though I love Thief, and you know, and that for me, there's very rarely sort of single films that completely level up. There's just like, I get super excited about this, and that leads me to something else, because you read an interview with Michael Mann and he might talk about Rafifi, so you go and watch Rafifi.
Wake up, dog. I want you to be afraid. How does it feel?
And then you go down like a film noir sort of cupboard hole, and you get to Killer's Kiss, and you're back to Kubrick, and then you go into 2001. You know what I mean? You bounce around because you're following your nose of what is really interesting and what you're feeling at the time, what excites you at the time. There's various filmmakers that while I was growing up were influencing me, and there's obviously people like David Lynch and the way that he does thrillers, which is that they just feel strange and they're sort of emotionally weird at the same time as being propulsive. So like Wild at Heart. The Blue Velvet.
I don't know if you're a detective or a pervert.
Well, it's for me to know and you to find out.
But then there's also David Fincher.
There are 7 deadly sins. Gluttony.
You're going to come take a look at this.
Greed.
No one touches anything.
Sloth. Wrath. Pride. Lust. And envy. 7. You can expect 5 more of these.
His thrillers are so tight, so fast, so beautifully made. I mean, they don't look anything like mine, but I find his sort of filmmaking really inspirational.
He gave himself a name.
Greek, Morse code, astrological signs. This guy's used them all.
I like killing people because man is the most dangerous animal of all.
But then there's also Andrea Arnold, the UK filmmaker whose films look like social dramas, but if you watch Red Road or Fish Tank, they feel like Hitchcock thrillers.
Yeah, you're 15 years old.
What does it matter if you like someone?
You need sorting out, you do.
So you keep saying, but you don't know nothing, so why should I listen?
They feel so tense, and you really don't know what's going to happen, and who's this character, what they're going to do. And it was after watching Red Road that I cast Martin Compston in my first film, because he's so good in Red Road. And so, there are films that are sort of almost perfect and untouchable, like Doctor Strangelove or Zodiac, things like that, it's hard to sort of see how they could be improved. But then there's other ones which are just got some sort of interesting flavor to them, that they're not perfect, they're a bit weird, but they just sort of scratch something in your brain that makes you kind of feel like, yeah, I could, there's something really interesting there. It's like, just that scene is really interesting. In The Disappearance of Alice Creed, there was like a scene in another kidnap film where they just had to care for the person they were kidnapping. And the idea of like, oh God, it must be like being a carer, you know what I mean? Like, because they're tied up, they can't go to the bathroom, they can't eat, you've got to do it all for them.
Give me back my son!
That's a very intimate situation. I've never really seen a whole movie about that, and that's kind of where that came from. That it wasn't a great movie, it was a fine movie, but it was just like one little moment you kind of feel like, oh yeah, that could be a thing,
Yeah. It's interesting. You actually remind me of a quote from John Woo that I also distinctly remember about him also never having held a gun actually in his life and being afraid of guns. And he's just making some of the most visually beautiful gunplay in movie history. Can't wait to see his next feature as well. I was also reminded, actually, I don't know if you've seen The Killer yet with Michael Fassbender, speaking of David Fincher. I got to watch it recently in the cinema. It's amazing, but it's also, again, it deals with a character that's much more psychopathic. It's not as charming or as human as the characters in your show.
My process is purely logistical. If I'm effective, it's because of one simple fact. I don't give a
But I still find it really interesting when you're dealing with characters they're all serial criminals, of course, and you're walking on that fine line between giving them an interesting edge without pushing them so far onto the dark side that you alienate the viewers at the same time. I guess that it must be an interesting and daunting challenge as a storyteller to deal with these sort of characters.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the gangster movie, really. If you watch something like Scarface.
Me, I want what's coming to me.
Oh, well, what's coming to you, Tony?
The world, Chico.
Or even, like The Wolf of Wall Street or Goodfellas. They're all sort of basically gangster movies. And, that's what we had with Rosamund's character in I Care a Lot, was she's not likable. She doesn't want to be likable.
Good morning, Miss Peterson. I'm sorry to disturb you so early. The court has ruled that you require assistance in taking care of yourself. I'm fine. I'm afraid it's not up to you to decide. The court has appointed me to be your legal guardian. What?
But as long as you're enjoying watching her, it doesn't matter if she's likable. It's kind of the same with Succession, I guess, recently. But then in Culprits, I think, you know, we establish him as like somebody you might see at the school gate very early on, somebody you just sort of bump into socially and know locally, and he's a nice guy. And, you know, I drop my kids off at the school and I don't know, you know, I say hello to these people and I have like this sort of very shallow friendship with them because we just sort of know each other because we all have kids at the same age. I don't know what they do. And so my mind goes like, well, what could they be doing? You know, I mean, they may be going home and, you know, if one of them asked me to sort of help them move a massive suitcase into the back of a van, just because, like, you know, we're sort of friends, like, would I do that? I don't know. And there's a way of getting, you know, crimes all around us. You know, criminals have children. Their children go to school. They get flat tires. You know, it's they are people. And what I'm interested in is sort of that grubby humanity. And I'm interested in crime, I guess, because you can sort of live vicariously through movies, through the dark stuff, and get into threatening situations. And, you know, it's like a roller coaster. You feel like it's dangerous, but it's safe because you're just watching on the screen. And so you can sort of like get those feelings and realize, no, I don't want that. You know, I've lived in it a while, but now I want to step away. And I think it's a good way of sort of, like with horror movies, you like to get scared, so you like to feel safe. And it's the same with thrillers, I think. It's like, I like to feel the discomfort so I can be happy in my boring life. And all Joe wants is a boring life. Yes, you know what I mean? He just wants what we've all got, which is, you know, he wants to just like work at a bistro, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we talked about before with hot sauces and thrillers and horror movies. There's that cathartic element to it as well. I mean, there's that sort of release that you also get from it. I wonder if we will ever get a mix of those three things in a film. That would be amazing.
It's like going to the gym, I guess, a little bit as well. You know, like you get the release, you get the adrenaline, and the adrenaline goes, and afterwards you kind of feel like, you know, you just relax. You know, so you feel exercise. You might have a stressful day, and then you get more stress watching a thriller, but then it goes because you can work through it. It's like therapy or something.
Yeah. Speaking of the gym, just a quick segue into I'm just thankful of you getting me to delve into Basement Jaxx's repertoire once again with that little needle drop of Romeo in the gym scene. That was great. I was like, I haven't listened to them for years, but they're great.
You keep on giving me the hold up. You know I wish you'd make your mind up.
I gotta rediscover their discography. So thank you so much for that. That was great.
Yeah, well, that's one I hadn't thought of for a while. I think that was our music supervisor says, "What about this?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's such a tune. Let's put that in." Yeah, that really reminds me of when I first moved to London. So, good memories.
You mentioned previously Nathan. I, of course, we could talk for ages about the cast. The cast is just amazing all around. But Nathan Stewart Jarrett is just like a revelation in this part. And I mean, I hadn't seen him in that much stuff before. And I know you've said before that you don't like to write characters with specific actors in mind, but he just seems so perfect for this part. I mean, what made you think of him? Can you talk a bit about your creative collaboration with him?
Yeah, I mean, Nathan was somebody I was been aware of from like just seeing him pop up in smaller parts in other things. He often turns up and like steals a scene.
Ellen stands up and walks right into the fire. And it's on that spot that she dies, burns to death. Is my rosé still in the freezer?
And I always love actors like that, you know. Eddie Marzan was like that. He'd turn up and he'd be the best scene in the movie was the scene with Eddie Marzan in. So when I could cast him in a bigger part in Alice Creed, then I was excited to do so. With Nathan, he'd been in Utopia, he'd been in Misfits, he'd been in a role in Candyman, he'd been on stage in Angels in America. So he was a very well-respected actor, but he was sort of like, you know, popping up in different scenes as a supporting actor. But, you know, you could tell that he was ready to be a lead because he was just like so good in these roles. And, you know, he came in to audition for it. So he came and he read. And as soon as, you know, he was doing like this on Zoom because he was in America and I was in the UK. And as soon as he started doing a scene, he did like a big, long scene. It's like there's some big, long dialogue scenes in this show, like multiple pages. He did one of these big, long scenes. And he was just so compelling. He just had so much pathos and empathy to him, but at the same time he could just sort of change the way his eyes looked, and then there'd be a hardness there, a capability, you know what I mean? Like, you could really believe that he used to be this guy who was ruthless and brutal, And I just love that sort of ambiguity. I love ambiguous characters anyway. So having somebody you're not as your lead that you're like, I think he's a good guy. Is he a good guy? I like him, but is he a good guy? And because you have that in everyday life with people you meet. It's like, I really like him, but is he dangerous? I can't tell. So that was, you could see that immediately. And then we just had lots and lots of conversations. I mean, it was a long shoot, so we had a lot of time to talk. And it was just after a little while, we got the instinct of what was right, what was wrong for him. And we started shooting by doing all of the America stuff first. So he shot all the stuff with the family. So then when we went and did everything else in the past or in the sort of detective part of the show, the sort of the mystery, he had those memories of being with those children and being with Kevin, who plays Jules, and being in that house. And he could, I think it's really useful for actors if they have this almost muscle memory that they can remember the smell of those scenes. They can remember the sound of the kids' voices or the kids laughing, so that you can, in the moments where you're trying to be emotional about the thing that's at stake, he can just conjure those images up. And obviously he has his own process. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think he's phenomenal in it. I think, this is a very different part for him. I've not seen him do anything quite like this. And I think he does exceptionally well because, you have to care about this character. And you really, really do.
Yeah, definitely. Right from the first, few scenes, you're immediately engrossed in his story. Speaking of memorable eyes, again, I'd love to talk about the entire cast, but I only have a few minutes left. But Ned Dennehy's eyes are amazing as well. And I'd just love to hear sort of your thought process in making this crazy, memorable villain throughout the story. Because when you read it on the page, I guess you'd say an elderly, lanky dude wearing a purple jogging outfit with a pale mask on, where you just see his eyes. Doesn't sound scary on the page, but he's just immediately from that opening scene intensely scary. What were your thought process in making the villain of the piece?
Yeah, luckily it wasn't read like that on the page. It was just written as sort of like this threatening, scary guy was coming, and with a mask on, and then it's like, you have these like little decisions you have to make of like, what is he going to wear and how far can we push it? Because there is this tone of slightly heightened and not quite in the real world. So, that's sort of in genre, but sort of not in genre. And so sort of dressing him in that tracksuit. And then it was very important to find the right mask. And then we actually made the eye holes bigger in that mask so we could see more of them. And he's wearing a contact lens in one of his eyes to make it pop more. And if you take away all of an actor's skill in his face, then he's going to start doing things with his physicality, like a mime, and he's going to start doing things with his eyes because that's all we've got. So he's taking one of like Ned's things, which is Ned is normally very still and very scary with his voice and his eyes.
Arthur tells me when they were taking care of some business at the betting shop, you ran away.
It was unfair.
Fairness is not a soldier's concern.
And he's suddenly got this sort of live physicality, which is sort of bizarre, but scary. You know what I mean? And scary because it's bizarre. It's unsettling because you're not quite sure how to feel about it. You know what I mean? And he never runs. He just always walks. And, he has just sort of this weirdness to him, which is, it's a bit like when you what's that film of Bigfoot, where you get a little glimpse of it, it turns towards camera and you're like, ugh! You know what I mean? It's like, what is that? I don't understand. And with his character, it's like that until we get to know him a bit more later in the show. But Ned can, Ned's got such a great voice, such a great face that, we tease it for a long time with a mask, but then when the mask comes off, you've got, a few episodes in, you've got this like great gift of Ned and his acting. So no, Ned, Ned's one of those actors, like a lot of the actors in the show, that I've sort of collected in my mind, like written down in a notebook in my mind of like, oh God, I really like them. They always come and do something. Like Nathan was one of those. And, Neve Algar's one of those, Kirby's one of those, Eddie Izzard's one of those. And you just collect them in your head. And I've got like hundreds of them. But then when you have a project, a few of them pop up and go, oh, what about Neve? Maybe Neve will want to do it. And then, you ring them up and luckily she did want to do it. So that's how the cast like this comes together.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm a huge Trekkie. I don't know if you've seen any Star Trek, but it just feels like he's totally a reverse Geordi LaForge, who has the visor where the eyes are the only thing you're not seeing. So he just relies so much on all the rest of the physicality. I want to say, first of all, I'm thankful because I've read before that you had first planned this out as sort of a 3-season arc. And speaking as someone who has still hundreds of unopened Blu-rays, I'm kind of thankful that it's contained to one season so that I'm sure that I have the time to get through through it, but how did that change your sort of mindset, your approach to the storytelling in knowing that it's one big contained story in 8 episodes?
Well, that made it more exciting to me, because coming from cinema, that you do tell a whole story. I really love telling a whole story. And the only other thing I've done in TV is a 3-part miniseries called Gunpowder, where I could tell the whole story.
My sister was crushed like a seed. My brother butchered. They will be revenged. I am Robert Catesby. My purpose is to kill the King of England.
It's really frustrating as a viewer when you get to the end of a first season and, they've only just asked the important question. You've only just found out what the show's about. You're like, oh! And then like, what? And then sometimes they don't get a second season. And you're like, what's going to... Just so frustrated. So I really wanted to tell the whole story. So Stephen and I were both quite pleased that we just got to do it and finish it, rather than just start it and then get distracted and other people finish it off. So for me, it was great. And that means for the actors as well, that they can tell this whole story. They're not just waiting for their time to come. It's like, this is it. This is your time. Let's go. Make this the whole thing. And it sort of slightly changes the way that you think about the characters, because you're not just starting them on a journey. You're taking them on a whole journey. And for me, that just is a wonderful thing to do.
If we fight, we die. If we run, we die.
Most things in this world are way more scared of you than you are of them. Because we're apex predators.
Coffee? I'd like a coffee. Do you want a coffee?